A rich man saved an old woman with a child during a flood. Without thinking, he took them to his house. Days later, he trembled when he saw strange men hanging around his house. The rain fell relentlessly, turning the streets of Guadalajara into raging rivers. The waters rose rapidly, giving rise to a terrifying flood. The force of the current swept away everything in its path, leaving a trail of destruction and panic. Amid that chaos, Marabel, an 80-year-old woman, and Austina, a girl of only 10 years old, fought desperately against the waters that threatened to sweep them away. "Grandma, I'm so scared," Austina whimpered, her eyes wide open, reflecting the terror of the situation. "I know, dear, I know," Marabel answered, trying to keep her voice firm, although her fear was evident. She held Augustina's hand with all the strength she could muster, but her fragility made the fight against the flood almost impossible. "Everything will be okay. God will help us, my little one." The water rose higher and higher, and Marabel, at 80 years old, felt her strength abandoning her. Her knees were weakening, and the current was relentless. She looked at the sky, feeling the cold rain hitting her face. "Please, God, help us," she whispered, her words getting lost in the noise of the storm. She was desperate, her eyes filled with tears as she saw Augustina's affliction. "Grandma, the water is very high," Austina shouted, her thin voice cutting through the air. She squeezed Marabel's hand even tighter, her small legs trembling with fear and cold. "Stay with me, Austina, just a little longer," implored Marabel, trying to give strength to the girl, although she was on the verge of collapse. Every second that passed seemed like an eternity, and Marabel felt her strength fading. "Grandma, let's die," asked Austina, her tears mixing with the rain. "No, my dear, we are not going to die. God is with us, and someone is going to help us," said Marabel, her voice trembling but determined. She closed her eyes for a moment, making a last silent prayer for a miracle. At that moment, a car headlight illuminated the flooded street. Martin, a millionaire at heart and generous, was on his way to an important meeting when he saw the desperate scene. Without thinking twice, he parked the car on the sidewalk and ran towards them, feeling the freezing water soak his clothes. "Ladies, hold on to me," shouted Martin, his voice almost inaudible amid the roar of the storm. Marabel looked at him with eyes full of fear and desperation, but she trusted that stranger in a soaked suit. Austina, still clinging to Marabel's arm, sobbed. "Please help us," implored Marabel, her voice trembling but full of hope. Martin reached out and, with effort, managed to pull them out of the current. Each movement was a fight against the force of the water that insisted on taking them. Inside the car, the heat of the heater seemed almost unreal after the cutting cold of the flood. Marabel was shaking not only from the cold but also from shock. Her wrinkled and fragile hands squeezed the blanket that Martin had found in the back seat. Austina, still sobbing, hugged the old woman's body, seeking consolation. Martin looked at them, feeling a mixture of pity and determination. "Thank you very much, sir," said Marabel, her trembling voice almost getting lost in the sound of the rain. "You don't have to thank me," answered Martin, trying to sound reassuring. "Let's go to my house. There you can dry off and warm up. Don't worry about anything now." The journey seemed endless. Every corner represented a new challenge, with abandoned cars and fallen trees blocking the road. Martin's mind was on high alert, trying to find the best route to get home safely. While driving, he watched Marabel and Austina through the rearview mirror. The little girl had finally stopped crying, but her eyes were still swollen and red. Marabel, on the other hand, seemed to be in a state of deep shock, staring out the window as if she were reliving some past trauma. Finally, after what seemed like hours, they arrived at Martin's house. He parked the car and quickly helped Marabel and Austina get out. The rain was still falling hard, but the security of the house offered immediate relief. Upon entering, he took them directly to the living room, where a large fireplace offered a cozy warmth. He brought towels and dry clothes, insisting that they change and get comfortable. "I'm going to prepare something hot for you to drink," said Martin, heading to the kitchen. While making tea, he couldn't stop thinking about how those two souls had ended up in that situation. Who were they? What brought them here? Those questions swirled in his mind. He didn't know that that gesture of help would start a radical change in his life, that his life would not be the same. A mixture of curiosity and foreboding enveloped him as if a door was opening toward an unknown and inevitable future. Back in the living room, he handed the cups of tea to Marabel and Austina. The old woman held the cup with trembling hands, smiling gratefully. "You are very kind, sir," she began, but Martin interrupted her gently. "Call me Martin and don't worry now. We are all safe." Marabel nodded, seeming a little more relaxed. Austina, now wrapped in a blanket, was beginning to show signs of tiredness. Martin realized that the girl was not only physically exhausted, but also emotionally drained. Sitting next to them, he tried to start a conversation to better understand the situation. "Do you have somewhere to go? A relative or a friend?" he asked, keeping his voice low and soft. Marabel shook her head slowly. "No, we don't have anyone. It's just the two of us." He took a deep breath, trying to keep his composure. "We have lost everything, Mr. Martin. We have been on the street for months. Austina is my granddaughter, and I promised that I would take care of her, but it is becoming more difficult." Marabel's statement hit Martin like a punch in the stomach. He felt a lump form in his throat as the seriousness of the situation became evident. Determined to help, he put his hand on Marabel's shoulder, offering an encouraging smile. "You don't have to worry about it now. Stay here as long as you need. We will find a solution together." Marabel and Austina spent the night safely, warm, and fed. Martin, lying in his bed, couldn't stop thinking about them. How can life be so cruel? He reflected, feeling a new determination grow within him. He knew he needed to do more than just offer temporary shelter. Helping Marabel and Austina had become a personal mission, a way to return the luck and fortune he had accumulated over the years. He did not know that that simple act of kindness would set off a series of events that would transform his life forever. As the storm continued to rage outside, inside Martin's house, a new chapter began to unfold. That unexpected encounter in the storm not only saved Marabel and Austina, but also deeply touched Martin's heart. The day after the storm, the sun finally shone over Guadalajara, bringing a sense of calm after the tempest. Inside Martin's house, Marabel and Austina were still recovering from the trauma of the previous night. Marabel, although grateful to be safe, could not push away a feeling of unease that dominated her. While Martin prepared breakfast, Marabel walked around the living room, observing the details of the house. Her eyes fixed on an old portrait hanging on the wall. Her face turned pale. Martin noticed the change in her expression and approached curiously. "That's my great-uncle, Mr. Mendoza," said Martin, noticing Marabel's nervousness. "He moved to the United States many years ago." Marabel froze. Her hands trembled slightly. She tried to look away but couldn't. Martin frowned, feeling that something was wrong. "I was not well, it's okay," Mrs. Marabel said with a trembling voice. "It only brought back some memories." Martin perceived that there was more to that story. "Marabel, it seems that photo affected you. There's something you're not telling me." Marabel tried to hide it, but her nervousness was evident. "It's nothing, Mr. Martin. Just old memories." "What do you mean, old memories?" "Did you know my great-uncle Mendoza?" asked Martin, his curiosity increasing. Marabel looked away, trying to hide it. "No, I don't know him." Martin realized that she was lying. His expression changed, becoming more serious. "Marabel, you're lying. Where do you know my Uncle Mendoza from? Tell me, please." Marabel remained silent, her nervousness evident. "I don't know him." He insisted with a trembling voice. "Please, Marabel, can you trust me? What's going on?" Finally, Marabel took a deep breath, trying to gain courage. Her eyes filled with tears as she finally gave in. "It's okay. I need to tell you something. Mendoza, he was my brother, Martin." Martin was surprised. "But how is that possible? You said you had no family." Marabel looked away, her face expressing a mixture of pain and indignation. "He committed a crime, so it's you. You're the criminal in the family." The atmosphere in the room became tense. Marabel was paralyzed, her face expressing a mixture of pain and indignation. Martin, feeling confused and betrayed, suddenly stood up. "You're the criminal my great-uncle was talking about. You're in my house." "No," shouted Marabel, with tears running down her face. "I'm not a criminal. I was wrongly accused. Please, Martin, listen to me." Martin looked at her, his face hardened with confusion and distrust. "How can I know if you're telling the truth and if you are dangerous?" Marabel felt the weight of Martin's words like stabs in her heart. "I'm not dangerous, Martin. I never stole anything. My brother used me as a scapegoat to cover up his crimes. He destroyed my life." Martin took a deep breath, trying to process it all. The intensity of the emotion on Marabel's face made him doubt. He sat down again, with his head down in internal conflict. "Please explain everything to me, Marabel. I need to understand what happened." Marabel dried her tears and began to speak with a trembling but determined voice. "At that time, I was young and had many dreams. My brother Mendoza was an influential person in the city. One day, a large sum of money disappeared, and he accused me of having stolen it. He publicly humiliated me, and to protect my honor, I was forced to flee. Since then, I lived in misery, always looking over my shoulder." Martin felt a lump in his throat. Hearing the story, he never imagined that someone so close to his family could have suffered so much. "Marabel, I'm so sorry about all this, but you're not alone anymore. I will help you." Marabel nodded, trying to smile through the tears. "Thank you, Martin. You don't know how much this means to me." Martin took her hand, feeling a growing responsibility to protect her. "My great-uncle is in the United States, very old and sick. You don't have to worry about him now. You're safe here." Marabel breathed a sigh of relief, but there was still a shadow of worry in her eyes. Martin noticed it and decided not to pressure her anymore for the moment. Later, while they were having tea, Marabel began to share more details of her past. "I had a happy childhood. I grew up in a loving family, but everything changed when my brother became an influential and greedy person. He was always ambitious, but I never thought he would be capable of betraying me like that." Martin listened attentively, absorbing every word. "That must have been very difficult for you, Marabel. How did you manage to survive all these years?" "It was a daily struggle," Marabel replied with a voice full of pain. "I lost everything: my house, my family, my dignity. I lived on the streets, begging to survive, but I never lost hope. I always believed that one day I would find justice." Martin felt a growing admiration for Marabel. Her resilience and strength were inspiring. "You are an incredible woman, Marabel. Your story moved me deeply." Marabel smiled, although her eyes were still full of sadness. "Thank you, Martin. What kept me strong all these years was the love for my granddaughter, Austina. She is the reason why I kept fighting. I promised myself that I would take care of her no matter what happened." Martin looked at Austina, who was playing in the next room, and felt a deep respect for Marabel. "I will do everything I can to help them. They are no longer alone." "Thank you, Martin. You are our hope." At that moment, Martin realized that his gesture of helping Marabel and Austina had not only saved their lives, but also opened doors for him to discover hidden secrets from his own family. The room was silent after lunch. Marabel had gone to the bathroom, leaving her small bag on the sofa. Martin, curious, decided to pick up the bag that had fallen to the floor when he was doing some documents. They slid, scattering across the carpet. He began to pick them up, but something caught his attention. Austina and Marabel's documents were mixed up, but the last names were different. Martin frowned, trying to understand what that meant. "It can't be," Martin muttered as he took one of the papers and looked at it closer. The different last names indicated that Austina was not Marabel's granddaughter. He felt a wave of disappointment and anger rising within him. "So, Marabel was lying to me again," he thought, feeling the weight of betrayal. He knew he had to confront her immediately. When Marabel came back from the bathroom, he was standing, holding the documents with shaking hands. "Marabel, we need to talk now," Martin said, trying to keep his voice steady, but his anger was evident. Marabel looked at him, surprised and a little scared. What happened, Martin? She asked, trying to hide the nervousness in her voice. Martin threw the documents on the table. Explain this, Marabel. Why are the last names different? Who is Austina to you, really? He asked, his eyes fixed on hers, demanding the truth. Marabel felt a knot in her stomach. She knew she couldn't keep hiding the truth. She sighed deeply, feeling tears beginning to form. Martin, I'm not Augustina's grandmother, she confessed, her voice trembling. Martin took a step back as if he had been hit. What did you say? You lied to me all this time? His voice was full of pain and anger. He couldn't believe that Marabel had lied again. Stop, Marabel. You already lied once, and now this. He felt frustration grow inside him. Please, let me explain, begged Marabel, with tears running down her face. I promised Augustina's real mother that I would take care of her. She escaped from an abusive relationship and left the girl to me before she died. She made me promise to protect Austina at any cost. Martin crossed his arms, trying to stay calm but finding it difficult. And who is the biological father? Where is he? He asked, trying to understand the whole situation. Marabel hesitated but knew she couldn't hide anything else. Augustina's biological father is a violent man named Leon. He beat her mother, and she ran away to save her own life and her daughter's, Marabel explained, her voice full of sadness. He is looking for Austina to get her back. I just wanted to protect her. Martin was silent for a moment, trying to process everything. So, you lied to me to protect Austina? He asked, feeling that a little of the anger was dissipating but still feeling betrayed. Yes, Martin, Marabel said, her voice full of regret. I thought lying was the only way. Martin sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. I understand that you wanted to protect her, but lying is not the answer, Marabel. We could have found another way, he said, his voice softer now but still firm. Marabel felt the tears still running down. I know, Martin. I was desperate and scared. I am so sorry, she said, her voice full of sincerity. Martin looked at her, seeing the pain and regret in her eyes. If you lie again, Marabel, there will be no other chance. I can't help someone who doesn't trust me enough to tell me the truth, he said, his tone serious. Marabel nodded, knowing he was right. I promise I won't lie again. I just want to protect Austina and give her a safe and happy life, said Marabel, her voice full of determination. Martin sighed, feeling some of the weight lighten. So let's work together on this, but no more lies, Marabel. We need to be honest with each other, he said, finally reaching out his hand to her. Marabel took his hand, feeling a new hope being born as they sat down to discuss the future. Martin couldn't help but think about how much the truth had changed everything. He knew there were still many challenges ahead, but now with the truth in the light, he felt that they could face them together. Marabel took a deep breath before beginning to tell Augustina's story. The painful memories were fresh in her mind, but she knew she needed to be honest with Martin. Augustina's mother was called Rosario. She sold vegetables on the street and always donated some to me, Marabel began, her voice shaking as she tried to maintain her composure. Martin listened attentively, still struggling with his emotions. Rosario and I began a friendship. She was a kind woman, but her husband, Leon, was very violent. He beat her constantly. One day, she managed to escape and came to my house, but Leon found her and took her back. It was horrible to see that happen, Marabel continued, her words full of sadness. Rosario became pregnant shortly after. She was very afraid for her daughter. When Austina was born, Leon continued to beat Rosario. She ended up becoming seriously ill. She discovered that she had very serious cancer. She knew that she was going to die and feared for the future of her daughter. She didn't want Austina to suffer as she had suffered, Marabel explained, with tears rolling down her face. Martin felt a lump in his heart listening to the story. Then Rosario asked you to take care of the girl? He asked, with a soft voice but full of understanding. Marabel nodded. Yes, she begged me to take care of Austina. I knew what it was like to be alone in the world with no one to defend you. So I agreed. I promised Rosario that I would protect Austina with my life. After Rosario died, I raised Austina as if she were my granddaughter. I told her the truth when she was older, and she understood it, said Marabel, her voice full of pain and love at the same time. Martin looked at Marabel with a new understanding. And how did Austina react when she knew the truth? He asked, still processing everything he had heard. Austina said that she loves me and that I am her family. She calls me grandmother and wants to stay with me forever. I love her very much too, Martin. She is everything to me, answered Marabel, feeling relief to finally tell the truth. Martin sighed deeply, feeling that his anger diminished while compassion took its place. I understand why you lied, Marabel. But from now on, let's be honest with each other. I will take care of both of you. You will not be helpless, said Martin, with a voice of determination and affection. Marabel looked at him with gratitude. Thank you, Martin. Knowing that we are not alone means a lot to me and Austina. I know that everything will be fine with you by our side, she said, feeling a new hope blossom within her. Austina, who was listening to the conversation from the door, entered the room and ran into Marabel's arms. I love you, Grandma. Thank you for everything you've done for me. You're my family, said the girl, hugging Marabel tightly. Martin looked at the two, feeling a wave of love and protection. From now on, we will face everything together. No one else is going to hurt you. I promise, he said, with a firm voice full of promises. Marabel smiled through her tears, feeling stronger with Martin at her side. Martin, you know I'm already 80 years old. I'm very afraid for Augustina's future. She's only 10 years old, and if something happens to me, what will become of her? She said, with a trembling voice. Martin approached, holding Marabel's hands. Don't worry, Marabel. Nothing bad will happen to Austina while I'm here. If something happens to you, I'll take care of her as if she were my daughter, affirmed Martin, with a firm and comforting tone. Marabel sighed in relief, but still with a touch of fear in her eyes. Martin, I'm a realist. I'm very old. If something happens to me, Austina will not be able to take care of herself. She is not an adult, not even a teenager. I am so afraid for her life. I do not want her to be alone in the world, she said, squeezing Martin's hands tightly. Martin looked at Marabel with eyes full of determination. Aunt Marabel, calm down. I promise that Austina will never be alone. I will protect her and take care of her. Nothing bad will happen to her while I am here, he assured, feeling a wave of responsibility and affection grow within him. Marabel felt a wave of joy and relief flood her heart. My dear nephew, I never imagined I would have a nephew as kind-hearted as you. Thank you so much, Martin, she said, with a smile of gratitude on her face. Martin returned the smile, gently squeezing Marabel's hands. Aunt Marabel, you are family, and family takes care of each other. You can rest knowing that Austina will be in good hands, he said, with a warm tone. Marabel nodded, feeling lighter. You don't know how much that means to me, Martin. I'm so afraid to leave Austina alone, but with you by her side, I know that she will be safe, she said, with her eyes shining with gratitude. Martin hugged Marabel, feeling the weight of responsibility, but also the comfort of knowing that he was doing the right thing. We will face everything together, Aunt Marabel. You, me, and Austina. Nothing will stop us, he promised, with his voice full of conviction. Marabel moved away from the hug and looked at Martin with a comforting smile. You are a gift, Martin. I will never forget what you are doing for us, she said, feeling a deep connection with her nephew. Martin returned the smile, feeling stronger with Marabel's words. I will never forget how you took care of Austina and me. We will be a family together, facing everything that comes, he said, full of determination. As the two continued talking, the weight of the lies of the past began to disappear, replaced by a new hope and confidence in the future. Martin, Marabel, and Austina were ready to build a new life together, united by love and the commitment to take care of each other. This was the moment for the battle that was going to face. The house was silent when a loud knock on the door broke the silence. Marabel and Austina were in the living room watching television. Martin, who was in the kitchen, ran to answer, feeling a pang of unease. When he opened the door, he found a tall and corpulent man with eyes full of anger. His presence radiated a palpable threat, and Martin felt a chill run down his spine. "Who are you, and what do you want here?" asked Martin, trying to remain calm, but his heart was strong in his chest. Leon took a step forward, the aggressiveness evident in his posture. "I am Leon, Augustina's biological father. It doesn't matter how I found your house. What matters is that I'm here to take what's mine." "Where is Austina?" he demanded, his voice full of menace. His words were like knives cutting the air with a ferocity that made Martin shudder. Martin felt a wave of panic and protection at the same time. He knew he couldn't leave Austina in the hands of that man. "You're not qualified to care for her. A girl. Look at yourself, your tone of voice, your posture." "I'm not going to give you to Austina," answered Martin, standing firm, although his voice trembled slightly. Leon gave a sinister smile, getting closer, his eyes shining with cruel malice. "Who are you to say what's best for my daughter?" "I am her father," shouted Leon. The fury in his eyes frightened Martin. The venom in his words was unmistakable, and Martin felt his heart tighten. "I'm someone who wants to protect her. You don't seem capable of taking care of a child. Get out of here now before things get worse," said Martin, his voice increasing in tension. He tried to remain calm, but Leon's anger was overwhelming. Meanwhile, in the living room, Marabel and Austina listened to everything. Austina grabbed Marabel's hand, her eyes full of fear. "Grandmother, what's happening?" asked Austina with a trembling voice, looking anxiously at the door. "Is everything okay?" "Dear, Martin is here to protect us. We're not going to let anything bad happen to you," answered Marabel, trying to hide her fear. Her heart was uncontrollably racing, but she knew she needed to be strong for Austina. Leon moved forward. "You will regret defying me. I will get what is mine, and you will pay for it. I will not let you take Austina. Get out of here now," he shouted, feeling the adrenaline run through his veins. He knew he needed Marabel and Austina all over Costa. Leon finally backed off, but not before launching one last threat. His face contorted with hate. "This will not stay like this. You will pay, Martin. I will get my daughter back, and nothing will stop me," he said before slamming the door hard and leaving an aura of tension and fear in the air. Martin took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. He returned to the living room where Marabel and Austina were anxiously waiting, their faces pale with worry. He left. "We are safe for now," said Martin, trying to hide the worry in his voice, but it was impossible to completely hide it. Marabel looked at Martin, her eyes full of gratitude and fear. "Thank you, Martin. You saved us. But what are we going to do now?" "And if he comes back?" she asked with a trembling voice, squeezing Augustina's hand as if afraid that Leon could come back at any moment. Martin felt the seriousness of the situation. "We need to take precautions. We can't let him find us again. I will think of a plan to guarantee our safety." "I promise I won't let anything happen to them," he said, his voice firm and determined. Although his heart was heavy with responsibility, Austina looked at Martin, her eyes full of trust and admiration. "Thank you, Uncle Martin. I know you will protect us," she said with a small smile, trying to find comfort. Martin smiled back, feeling an even greater responsibility. "We will face this together. We are not alone. Stay calm and let me think about how to deal with Leon," he said, trying to convey security. Although he knew he would need all his strength and intelligence to protect his family, Martin knew he needed to act quickly. Leon was a dangerous man and would not give up easily. He looked at Marabel and Austina and promised himself that he would do everything to keep them safe. In the days that followed, Martin noticed suspicious movements around the house. Unknown men began to appear, watching the house from different points. Martin felt his stomach turn as he realized that Leon had hired thugs to intimidate them. He knew he needed to act quickly. The feeling of being watched all the time increased his tension. Every shadow seemed like a threat. "Marabel, we need to talk. Leon will not give up so easily. He has hired men to keep an eye on us," said Martin, the concern evident in his voice. He looked directly into Marabel's eyes, trying to communicate the seriousness of the situation without causing panic. Marabel looked at him, her eyes wide with fear, her body trembling slightly. "Martine, what are we going to do?" "I'm so scared for Austina." "She's just a little girl," said Marabel, her voice trembling as she held Augustina's hands tightly. Her words were full of desperation, and her hands were sweating coldly. Austina looked at Martine with big eyes full of uncertainty, trying to understand the seriousness of the situation. "We're going to be together and protect her. We're not going to let anything bad happen to her," Martine replied, trying to stay calm, but feeling the weight of responsibility increasing with every moment. He placed a comforting hand on Marabel's shoulder, trying to convey strength and security. He knew he needed a concrete plan, but the pressure was increasing. That night, while everyone was trying to sleep, Martine received a call. The voice on the other end was cold and threatening. "Martine, do you know who I am? If you don't hand Austina over, I'll make you suffer." "Don't underestimate my determination," said Leon, his voice loaded with malice. Martine felt a shiver run down his spine as if someone had put an ice cube in his heart. "Leon, you are not going to intimidate us." "I will protect Austina no matter what the cost," replied Martine, trying to sound firm, but feeling the threat was very real. He hung up the phone, knowing he had to act quickly. His hands were shaking, and he tried hard not to let the fear show when he got back to the living room. "Marabel, Leon called me. He is threatening us directly. We need to think about how to protect ourselves and Austina," said Martine, his voice low but full of urgency. He looked at Marabel, seeing the fear increasing in her eyes. "Martine, I fear for Augustina's life," said Marabel, tears running down her face. She was shaking from fear and worry, feeling helpless. The tears reflected the terror she felt for the safety of her granddaughter. "Marabel, we need to involve the police. Leon is too dangerous for us to face alone." "I will file a complaint and ask for protection," said Martine, determined not to let fear paralyze them. He knew this was the only way to protect his family. His eyes were determined, and he knew he had to act fast. Marabel nodded, feeling a little hope. "You're right, Martine. We can't face this alone. Let's ask for help," she said, holding Augustina's hand with strength. The girl looked at Martine, her eyes full of confidence and a touch of relief. "Uncle Martine, I know you're going to protect us." "Thank you for taking care of us," said Austina, her voice small but full of hope. She clung to Martine, feeling a little safer with him close. Martine smiled, feeling an even greater responsibility. "We are going to face this together. We are not alone. We are going to protect ourselves and make sure Leon doesn't hurt anyone else," said Martine with renewed determination. He knew that the battle was difficult, but he was willing to fight with all his might to protect his family. He took a deep breath, preparing for what was to come. Martine was determined to involve the police to protect his family. He took the phone and called the local police station, explaining the situation in detail and emphasizing the danger that Leon represented. But to his frustration, the police did not seem to take his concerns seriously. "Sir, we will do our best, but we have many ongoing cases. Your situation will be investigated," said the policeman on the other end of the line with a disinterested and indifferent voice. Martine hung up the phone angrily, feeling abandoned by the authorities. "Marabel, the police are not going to help us. We need to think of another plan. We must get out of here before something terrible happens," said Martine, his voice tense, his eyes full of determination. Marabel felt a knot in her stomach hearing that. "But where are we going, Martine? And if Leon finds us again?" she asked, her voice trembling, looking at Austina, who was sitting on the couch trying to understand what was happening. "We are going to plan everything carefully. We need to be fast and discreet. We can't leave traces that Leon can follow," said Martine, trying to calm Marabel. He knew he had to be strong for all of them. Martine began to list the items they would need for the escape: documents, money, clothes, and food. "Marabel, we need a safe place to hide. Maybe we can go to a trusted friend's house, someone that Leon doesn't know," suggested Martine, while thinking of possible places. Marabel still felt nervous. I know a friend who lives in a small town a few hours from here. She is a trustworthy person, and I'm sure she would help us, she said, trying to stay calm. Perfect. We are going to prepare everything and leave at dawn. We need to do it without raising suspicions, said Martin, starting to gather the documents and money they had. He knew that every minute was crucial. Austina, feeling the tension in the air, approached Martin. Uncle Martin, what is happening? Are we going to be okay? She asked, her big eyes full of fear and uncertainty. She held Martin's hand tightly, seeking comfort. We are going to be okay, Austina. We are going to get out of here and find a safe place. I promise you nothing bad will happen to you, said Martin, kneeling to be at Augustina's height and holding her hands. He felt the weight of responsibility, but also a renewed determination to protect his family. Marabel began to prepare a small suitcase with clothes and food. Her hands trembled slightly. We need to be fast. We can't leave anything that could indicate where we went, she said, her voice firm but full of concern. She looked at every corner of the house, trying to make sure they left the smallest trace possible. Martin looked at the house, knowing that leaving that place would not be easy but was necessary. We will leave as soon as the sun comes up. We will be ready. We will be together and protect ourselves, he said, his voice full of determination and love for the family. As the night progressed, the tension increased. Martin and Marabel worked in silence, aware of the importance of each movement. Austina, understanding the gravity of the situation, remained next to Martin, trying to be brave. Every sound outside the house made their hearts beat faster, but they knew they had to move on. Finally, at dawn, with the suitcase packed and a plan in mind, Martin, Marabel, and Austina realized that a drizzle had started and the streets of the city were filled with water. We need to get out now before the water rises any further, Martin said with a voice full of urgency, looking outside and watching the water run down the street, taking everything in its path. His concern grew with every second. Marabel, the storm is getting worse, and if we don't get out, she asked, her voice trembling. She knew they had no choice, but the danger was real and imminent. We can't stay here. Leon and his men are out there. We need to leave now before they find us, Martin answered, trying to hide his fear. He looked at Austina, who was visibly scared and bent down to talk to her. Austina, we need to be strong and brave. We're going to get out together and we'll be okay. Trust me, Martin said, holding her hands firmly. Austina nodded, trying to hold back her tears, feeling a little safer with Martin and Marabel close. They opened the door and were greeted by the fury of the storm. The wind roared and the rain fell hard. The water already covered Martin's feet as he helped Marabel and Austina get out. Stay close to me. Don't let go of my hands, he said, trying to guide Marabel and Austina through the flooded streets. As they ran, facing the force of the water, Martin looked back and saw shadows moving quickly. They were Leon's men, chasing them fast. We need to hide, Martin shouted, pulling Marabel and Austina towards a narrow alley. The water was rising quickly, making movement difficult. Marabel stumbled and almost fell, but Martin held her in time. I'm not going to let you fall. We'll get out of this together, he said with determination. His muscles ached, but he couldn't afford to stop. Leon's men were getting closer, and Martin knew they needed a quick plan. We're going to go into that abandoned building. We can hide there until the storm passes, he suggested, pointing to a nearby building. But what if they find us there? Marabel asked with a scared voice. She was exhausted but knew she had to continue. Austina squeezed her hand tightly, feeling the dread growing with every second. We're going to close the doors and go up to the upper floor. We'll have a vantage advantage, and it will be difficult for them to find us with all this water, Martin said, trying to stay calm. After calming Marabel, they ran towards the building. The water was already up to their knees. Inside the building, Martin locked the door and started to climb the stairs with Marabel and Austina. We are safe for now. We need to think about the next step, he said, breathing deeply. The sound of the water and the wind resonated on the walls, creating an atmosphere of tension. On the upper floor, they found a small room and took refuge there. Martin looked out the window, seeing Leon's men searching for them in the flooded streets. They are still outside, but we have a little time, he said, trying to stay calm. Marabel sat next to Austina, hugging her tightly. We will be fine, my dear. Martin is taking care of us, she said, trying to hide her fear. Austina looked at Martin, her eyes full of confidence and hope. Martin knew he had to act quickly. We will wait for the storm to subside a little, and then we will continue our escape. The storm roared outside, more devastating than the first, turning the streets into turbulent rivers. But the sound of the rain and the wind was eclipsed by the door that swung open. Leon, soaked and determined, entered the room where Martin, Marabel, and Austina were taking refuge. His heavy steps echoed on the wooden floor, and the atmosphere was charged with tension. Where's my daughter? I will take her now, no matter what they say, shouted Leon, his voice full of determination. He approached Martin, who stood in front of Marabel and Austina, protecting them with his body. You will not take Austina. She's safe here with us, and you have no right to take her away, Martin replied, his voice firm but his heart racing. He knew he couldn't show fear at that moment. Leon shouted back, Who are you to stop me? You're my daughter, and I have the right to take her away from you. His frustration was evident. Martin, staying calm, looked into Leon's eyes. You won't take Austina. You mistreated her mother, and she doesn't deserve your trust. She deserves a better life away from all this chaos. Marabel, take Austina to a safe place. I'll take care of this, said Martin, without taking his eyes off Leon. Marabel nodded and took Austina to a corner, hugging her tightly. The tension in the air was palpable. Determined to protect his new family, Martin faced Leon with an external calm that hid the internal storm. Leon, realizing that his approach wasn't working, tried a different tactic. You don't understand, Martin. Austina is my daughter, and I only want the best for her. I was a bad father in the past, but I want to fix that, he said, his voice softer, trying to manipulate the situation. Martin was not fooled. If you wanted the best for her, you wouldn't have let her live in fear. Austina needs stability and love, not empty promises. At that moment, a person on the other side of the street saw the confrontation through the window of the building and quickly called the police. Hello, police? Something is happening here. It seems serious. Send someone quickly, said the witness with a voice full of urgency. On the other end of the line, the operator responded with concern. The flood is very loud. We don't know when we can send a patrol, said the operator with hesitation in his voice. It's urgent. There's a girl involved. They have to do something, insisted the witness, almost pleading. We will do our best to send the officers as quickly as possible, answered the operator, promising a quick solution. The police, after many difficulties, managed to get to the place. They entered the building in a hurry, quickly going up the stairs. Hands up, shouted one of the police officers. Martin let out a sigh of relief, knowing that help had arrived. Leon raised his hands slowly, his expression changing from anger to resignation. The police approached and handcuffed him while Martin, Marabel, and Austina watched, still shaking with adrenaline. They're okay. We need to take them to a safe place, said one of the police officers, looking at the family with concern. Yes, we're okay now. Thank you for arriving on time, said Martin, feeling an enormous weight lift off his shoulders. He turned to Marabel and Austina, hugging them tightly. It's over now, he said, feeling the tears of relief run down his face. Marabel looked at Martin, her eyes full of gratitude. You saved us, Martin. I don't know what we would do without you, she said, her voice filled with emotion. Austina hugged Martin tightly, feeling finally safe. Thank you, Uncle Martin. I knew you would protect us, she said with a small smile, feeling relief fill her heart. Their love and unity triumphed over their fear, and they were ready to face the future together, stronger than ever. As a happy family, free from threats, they shared moments of joy and peace. United, they would face the future with hope and determination, knowing that as long as they were together, they could overcome any challenge that came their way. If you appreciate this story, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment telling us your opinion about the story. Your support is very important to us. And now, on your screen, another exciting story is appearing for you.